so-called intellectual property they have, including some which has to do apparently with Unix, and what's applicable to Unix might be applicable to Linux as well. And what actually happened is the OSI, the Open Source Initiative, was filing a complaint in Germany against, and they filed it to something like an anti-cartel kind of office. I can't remember the exact name of that. Basically claiming Microsoft is trying to create a cartel here and to extort the competition and join in with some companies to try and restrict the spread of software that opposes them. And what happened then is Microsoft withdrew the desire to get the patents through CPTN. And people say, well, of course they did, but especially they did this in Germany because they're trying to hide something. So they're going. So this is extremely interesting for any person who keeps track of what Microsoft does in terms of using patents against the competition. Because of course, the only thing you can do when you don't have a good product is to use lawyers and to use governments and to use all kinds of things against the competition, because that's the only resort you have left. One other thing they do is that's the last thing I'll say is these days, and I have some articles to do about that, is they use all kinds of ex-Microsoft employees and presidents and things like that and friends of the company to sue, especially things like Android these days, and trying to elevate the cost of Android and put Android in a position where it's either embargoed through the ITC, things like the injunctions being sent and all kinds of trouble like that, or the cost of Android going up, in which case you might actually have Microsoft and its allies making money every time you buy an Android phone. And that's a whole kind of bizarre world where you basically buy a phone, and instead of the revenue going to people who wrote the code, who wrote all the code or wrote some of the code, a lot of the money will go to people who had absolutely nothing to do with the code, just people who are just litigating or saying, well, we own the method of, I don't know, of having a menu or asking the user, how to shut down the phone, things like that, which I find extremely disturbing, especially if we allow this to happen. It just turns it into a really bizarre, strange situation where people fight using pieces of paper instead of just sitting down and writing some good code.
Well, what we'll do, I've got a very quick Microsoft-related topic just to throw in very quickly, and it's going back for 2010 now for the sales figures of the consoles. There's a global figure in, as it were, for all of the UK, and I've sourced the article on my site so you can have a read of it yourself, because it's far more detailed than what I'm going to mention. But it does show an interesting trend. I think we've often said that you can't take stats as the complete truth that can be.
I don't think any single firm is actually checking the numbers of console sold globally.
I think what this figure shows though more is that just something quite interesting. I don't intend to pull this figure just as an example to show how great things are selling. More just really a change in trend. Me and Roy have had debates before about the Xbox, Microsoft's flagship piece of hardware is what I regard it as, which is a Xbox 360, and its rival the Sony PlayStation 3. Now, according to this article, over the 2010, the sales figures for the two consoles. Now, traditionally, I've always been of the opinion that the Xbox 360 way outsold the PS3. And that was from personal experience, but again, it was in my own limited experience. But according to this article, over 2010, Xbox has outsold PS3, but only by 232 million to Sony's 229 million, which isn't a very big gap. So really, it's just going to show that maybe there's a change in trend there, and what I perceive as traditionally the more successful console, which was the 360, is slowly being eroded by the PS3, who seems that people are buying. I don't suppose you would have a comment on that, Roy?
I don't even know who's managing the department, to be honest with you, in Xbox. I think everyone's just about left. Peter left a few years ago, and then Robert Back was leaving just months ago. Maybe he was fired, I'm not sure. And then you had just about everyone. I cannot even name a single person who's in management, because I can think of like 5 people I wrote about personally, who are like the top chief people, like directors, and they just left the project. I don't know who runs the thing.
I mean, one of the things I think we brought up in the last show is what I found interesting. If we see any claimed user figures for the Xbox 360, how much accuracy we can put on these, because I think we covered last show that a lot of people had bought 2 or 3 Xboxes when each consecutive one had broken.
That's why you cannot trust the figures.
Yeah, and exactly. So, it could well be the case of that the actual sales of Xbox 360 don't represent in any way the users of Xbox, because, of course, if people are buying multiple machines because their previous ones are breaking, it's not accurate. So I think that's worth noting as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack us with...
Yeah, I mean, it works against us in some way as well. If you consider Android, I think it's fair to take Apple's points. They basically say when Android talks about the numbers, it talks about activations, but activations can also mean updates in terms of the version of the operating system. So when they say activations, they don't actually tell you how many phones sold. They tell you activations, and people take the number as a number of units sold, and it's not quite the case. So even Google is really playing some games here with statistics and definitions and things like that. So we have to be always very careful and to ask questions about how it's measured, who measures it, and things like that. Are we actually comparing apples and oranges here? And I think that happens a lot with consoles too.
I mean, my best indicator for me anyway is looking at my peers and seeing what they have and sort of seeing the average, what the average is, but between all the sort of platforms and all sorts of devices. Of course, it's it's the best I can do, because of course, like you say rightly, there's all sorts of things that can affect the statistics that were given. Not just bias, there's all sorts of other environmental factors, shall we say, that can affect the statistics for anything. So
so people work within an environment with people who are colleagues who work in a certain area, but they also work within a certain geography, and this kind of combines into a complete bias, and people are asking their peers what games they have, and they tend to choose the same thing. So there is really kind of a network effect also.
Yeah.
It's a really kind of the worst thing you can do is to check within a local what's going on.
Well, sorry to take us off topic slightly with console talk, because this is a Linux and free and open source software show. So, Roy, have you got any other articles that you want to bring up from the free and open source world, or Linux, or Microsoft?
There's quite a lot of them actually about Apple and VLC. Did you follow any of these stories?
I haven't. I've been on the periphery for most of that story. I've seen quite a few of my Twitter followers, the people I follow on Twitter, speaking about it. But no, I'll leave that up to you to.
Story, yeah. I wrote a couple of articles, but actually 3 articles in the past few days about it. I also found a person to help me out with the articles, and we kind of co-edit the articles because I had too much to write, and I cannot actually write it fast enough to do that. And this person with me, actually, we picked up some references. What actually happened is Apple, as you have probably known, since around September last year, is having this power play over the GPL, and they kind of argue with the VLC developers and kind of develop using the GPL. And Apple cannot guarantee the third freedom, and the third freedom being the third freedom the way that not the way that Stallman counts them from 0. And in any case, Apple cannot quite accept as legal, the free software. So they would accept your proprietary app, but if you want to actually install something that's a GPL license, you have to jailbreak your phone, break the rules to install a free app, which is kind of funny. It's not actually funny, it's actually sad, but it's kind of funny when you actually ridicule Apple for what they do and how they do business and things like that. And some people try to accuse the developer of VNC of causing trouble and saying, well, it works, I think it works in Nokia or something, and they maybe has a conflict of interest or something like that. But Apple is really getting bad PR here, especially among the people who are buying an iPhone thinking, I'm going to manage my Linux server from it, and just think, well, what is this Apple thing? Is this serious? They're just trying to really patronize everyone. And I think that's pretty useful to any person who thinks of Apple as a company which attracts people who, if they understood the concepts of freedom, would go away to Ubuntu or something like that, which maybe resembles or tries to emulate Mac OS X. And I know some people who do that. I actually have a good number of stories I've collected over the years of people who leave Mac OS X, especially for reasons of freedom, and move to Linux and really enjoying the freedom and everything else. And of course, there are also the opposite stories, and that's okay. One interesting story though is the BSA, the business self-reliance, I think it stands for. The BSA is like the private police of all sorts of proprietary software companies, notably Microsoft, and they actually give big emphasis to Microsoft, and they seem to be